that doesn't have.
Sure.
Thank you. This one is in Layton, where they've put the garages on the back of the project and the parking, pulled the units closer to the street, and it just gives it just better appearance than it being dominated, particularly connected with town-owned units. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was in attendance last time but wasn't able to speak. Brian Benyon, 574 South, 250 East. As a practicing architect, I can see some of the potential of this property in the developer's eyes that he has on this property. I know that this commission and the city code and building requirements are there to protect his investment, but they're also there to protect our investment. As a homeowner of this neighborhood, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'd like to comment also and ditto Tim's comments about the large extra width double car garage. Could appear to be more like a warehouse or a storage unit complex. There's also a large, significant grade change on the site, and I would hope the developer would consider that in stepping the units rather than creating a large box. It's about 5 times the size of the neighbor next door. You can step the structure, save on grading and earthwork, and not require retaining walls on either end, whether you dig into Main Street end or you build up and have this larger unit complex right next to the neighbor to the west. I have confidence that the development agreement will help tune some of these aesthetics that we're requesting as a neighborhood, and I appreciate those comments that have been made in the past and don't want to repeat any of those others. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are live streaming now, so.
Perfect. We don't have anybody else. We will close public comment. And
The original proposal that we had in the packet was from the first time we came around in February, but we don't have any issues of doing, I'm not sure what Tim had shown you, but probably with the same one he had shown us. But we don't have any issue if the neighbors feel like parking should be on the other side, and if it fits.
I'll add, I think he was showing the one on Destination that's over there on Gentile, which is similar. Yeah.
So we don't have any issues with that. So.
Thank you.
Excuse me, it's hard to hear. It's not running the microphone in the back.
My comment was that we don't have any issue with putting parking in the back. So we had brought additional concepts with us tonight to show that we aren't, we don't necessarily are stuck to what had been provided in this packet. If the neighborhood would prefer parking in the back and if it fits, great. We have no problem with that.
State your name.
I think just something important to note is...
State your name.
My name is Mark Lund. I think something important to note is that we're trying to build something that does look great. We value the neighborhood, we value the neighbors. We haven't ruled out living in one of the units ourselves as well. So we value that. We want it to look good, and we want it to feel and fit in well with the neighborhood as well. So that's why we're open to these things. We want to build something nice.
Cool. Thank you.
Al Starkey, 573 South, 350 East. I have 2 additions. My focus last time was on safety. I've been through the accident report. I've given Mindy copies of the accident data, and it only shows 6 accidents between 17 and 21 on 475. However, there could be another 7 points, which would double the number of accidents within a region. When an officer writes a report, he has to make some judgments on what is the location where the car comes from. I, as an individual, can't get access to those reports. So my request is somebody from the city, engineer, somebody, ask for the reports, and we could look at them and see if there are additional reports. Second point on accident data. 5 years, 2 of which are COVID years. You'll see with the chart that it's questionable whether you base a safety decision based on 2 questionable years. Item number 2. I've gone up the intersection up to Main on 475 many times, and my opinion is the offset on the east may cause a partially bind corner, okay? And so whatever's put out there for hedges, fences, needs to be considered with the ability to not encumber vision for drivers as they come up. An alternative, of course, might be put a sign out there and say, the vision is limited. Your engineer and the developers can find solutions, but please go in thinking about possible visibility, because I think some of the accidents are based on it. On the south side, there are trees, there is a bus hub, and when a bus comes, most drivers would wait for the bus to pass. But the point is, if you've got limited vision on the north or on the south, that intersection still could be a problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
One way, 293 East, 475 South, just next door to the property. Firstly, I want to thank you to Mr. Allred to ask about the garage scene. I want the garage, the enclosed parking space, being written into the agreement, not just the 12 parking stalls. This is, this is better, thank you. And I read the development agreement, and I find a picture of Exhibit B, which it shows that this building set more than 30 feet back from the curb, which make the driveway aligned or half aligned to my house. So there's a hazard the car would crash into my house. So I strongly recommend to build a concrete wall along the fence on the west side of the property. Also, if it's all asphalt and concrete without any green space near, the stormwater will funnel down from its impervious lot to flood my house. So we brought up this question last meeting, but it remains unanswered. I cannot find anything from the development agreement. Also, I will kind of support this RM rezone if this property location is like the Whisper Covert nursing home, where no house on the left, no intersection on the right, far away from the traffic lights, which has its own entrance direct to the main street. But this one, totally on the opposite, literally on all aspects I mentioned. When comparing to the DDAC townhomes located on the 250 South Street, if you open up the map, you will see that the location is kind of secluded. Nobody except the resident in the several houses will use their front door, 250 South Street. The townhomes face the huge DDA's green playground. Yet this property is right at the intersection. There are 80 to 90 households, several hundreds of cars down the slope need to use this narrow entrance every day. The DTAC townhomes only get rezoned to R2. Why? This lot needs much less restrictive RM zoning. So also the 30 feet high building will block the traffic view for sure, and the street parking won't help but only worsen. Last Wednesday, Mr. White and Miss London they came to talk to me for a while, and they said that they will advise the city to paint both of the curbs red, but I cannot find anything like that in the development agreement. Maybe they're just saying it. I don't know. Also, one major reason we are against the RM zoning is that because if something happens, like they run out of money, or we have a 2008 kind of a recession problem, the next developer will not be under the same agreement restrictions. Not to mention some of the developers intentionally fail their project and then do the resale. So a R2 zone will ensure the maximum number of the households. For that land will be 6. Rezone that area has long-term consequences. We must make the provisions of the agreement binding on anyone that may end up owning the parcel in the future. Lastly, I want to say thank you to most of the commissioners for bringing up the R2 suggestion for the developers in the last meeting. Everybody thought they will have an agreement under they will come up with an agreement under the R2 code, but it seems they choose to ignore most of the questions brought up by our neighbors and reject the professional advice from our commissioners. Once again, we are strongly against the RM rezoning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name's Spencer. I live at 388 South Main, which is the red duplex, kind of down by Bob Hackmeister Insurance. I just thought I'd get it because our property's been referenced a couple times because it's a rent. We do rent out one half, we own it, and then live in one half and rent the other half. So we do have a rental property in the area, which has been mentioned. I think it's pretty apparent like that everyone's like against the RM thing, and obviously like from our perspective, like I think if they bought the lot next to your house, a half an acre is like what most people want to live on. Like that's the goal, I think, right? And so if somebody bought a half acre lot right next door to you and just wanted to slap up as many townhomes as they could fit, I think everyone would be against that. But obviously he wants it as to make money, which is great because I'd love a rental property like that. But I think like Tim's mentioned with the development agreement, there's probably somewhere in the middle we could all like come to an agreement and meet. And like I think duplex is a great idea. There's several of those in the area, and so limiting the zoning to something like duplexes, we already have multiple of those in the area, so duplexes fit right in. And the other thing I think that would help too, like we were talking about back there, some of the like pictures in that are referenced are like single car garages, and we keep mentioning like 2 enclosed parking spaces, but then the picture's a single car garage, and then like they even mentioned a single car garage, but then it was mentioned 2 enclosed parking spaces, so it's kind of confusing as to what's being put in the agreement versus like what's actually going to be built, because like what's being said and what's being shown is very different. So that's just kind of hard to tell. So I think more like drawings, like architectural drawings, something would help. And then I think just considering like if somebody bought the half acre lot right next to your house and wanted to slap up as many townhomes as possible, I think we'd all be kind of opposed to that. So I think just like being careful about what we actually build there, just kind of limiting it and being mindful of what's in the area and what would fit well, and like what we would each want next to our very own houses, but also allowing him to do something that can achieve his goal, which is make money. So if we can meet somewhere in the middle, I think that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you.
just to clarify, what's on the screen shows what's in the development agreement, that there would be a minimum of 12 parking spaces provided. It does not specify whether they're garage not garage. It just says a minimum of 12 parking spaces.
Thank you.
So if the commission wanted to consider anything above and beyond that, we would need to look at amending what's in the draft development agreement.
Okay. If that's all the comments, I'm going to close the public comments and open it up for discussion with commissioners. So, what's your flavor?
Question to staff, and I think I know the answer to this, but let's just clarify. So the suggestion of parking in the rear, I think, while that could be a very novel and good solution, I'm not sure that when you combine the setback requirements that exist and the constraints of the site, that's even possible. Now, of course, I'm just looking at Exhibit B in the development agreement and just eyeballing it. It may work once you actually get it, more fully engineered or designed out. But my question to staff is, what is the setback shown on Exhibit B right now from the front of those units, and B, how close could those come to the sidewalk with no driveways on the front and have the driveways or the garages in the rear?
Right, so the site plan that was submitted was essentially what the developer used to determine how many they knew they could make fit. They didn't want to spend a whole lot of money engineering above and beyond that if they were not going to have a zone change approved. All I can tell you is what the setbacks are. I can't tell you what will fit. So going back to the screen, the RM setbacks are 20 feet each side abutting a street. So the front setback would have to be 20 feet if these were facing, 20 feet on the Main Street side and 20 feet on the side of 475 South. So then they have to also meet 15 feet rear setback from what I would assume would be the north side of the property, would be the rear, considered the rear. I don't think that UDOT would grant access from Main Street for this project. It would have to come off of 475 South. And then again, as we looked at this, the density between 6 townhomes and we talked about R2, right? It's the same. The traffic, the trips generation, they will be the same. So the trade-off is the additional 2 driveways for a total of 3 versus 1 driveway. It's the same amount of units. So to answer the question, I don't know if they could make rear loading garages work on the site. That's something that they would have to look at. They'd have to consider that with an architect and an engineer to see if that would work.
Maybe a follow-up question then. I think it's my guess is, and I agree it has to be worked out in detail, but my guess is it's going to be tight to be able to fit rear loading, rear garages or whatever, unless, and I don't know if this is possible, and I think the only way it would be possible is if we did rezone it to, let's say, RM with a PRUD overlay, which gives us some flexibility, I think, I'm not certain. PRUD overlay gives us some flexibility on setbacks, and then we could bring them up closer to the sidewalk, and then that gives a lot more space, and you still only could have one entrance further to the, west side, maybe lined up with the drive into the church, like similar to how Exhibit B is showing. So then I guess my question is, am I correct, and do we even know if the applicant wanted to do PRUD overlay, or if we were to recommend that, let's say, could that even accomplish a smaller setback on the front?
I think my microphone on. I think the answer is yes, we probably could, but at what expense? And I don't know if that would then negatively impact other, like I said, there's a little curvature in the road. The reason why you have those setbacks, especially on a quarter, is because you want to maintain that triangular visibility of where you have an intersection. It's why we don't allow fences above, well, I assume Kaysville doesn't allow fences above 3 feet in a front yard. We don't allow, we would allow a 6-foot set fence essentially starting where a building could start, right? Because we don't want to detract from visibility of the traffic in the intersection and people on the sidewalk. And so my concern would be we're trading then perhaps traffic safety and pedestrian safety to try and get aesthetics that may feel better to the neighborhood.
Well, and I certainly wouldn't want to, encroach on a site triangle or anything of that nature. But I guess I maybe just throw that out to the developer and or the council to the extent that they listen to this and consider this as an option. If it can work with safety concerns and aesthetic concerns, and a PRUD overlay could get us there, maybe that's an option. That's my point.
Staff, one other question for you is, one of the concerns also is water. I mean, I know that'll be addressed. It's not something we address, but that is addressed by city engineer, correct?
Yeah, are you talking about culinary water?
No. This is any runoff
Oh, yeah.
mitigation.
Correct, yes.
I just wanted
So,
to address that because it was brought up several times.
Yeah, through the development process, this would have to meet requirements with our stormwater development that any development would need to meet. And sorry, I'm stammering here, but the city engineer would look at the proposed stormwater retention, low impact development type of solutions that we're putting in place and see whether or not they would work. And we wouldn't get to a point where a building permit would be approved unless that stormwater was being successfully dealt with.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
As a new planning commissioner, I apologize, I'm not as familiar with all of the city's ordinances as I would like to be. But the suggestion of a PRUD, in my opinion, is a very valid one. But it does raise a couple of concerns. Moving the building closer to the street is generally a really good idea because it actually provides for a little more safety. Buildings that are scooted closer to the street tend to provide a calming effect on traffic because when the road is narrower and buildings are closer to it, psychologically people tend to slow down. So the wider and the straighter the road, the faster the traffic goes. But the whole point of a planned unit development or a PRUD is to allow some flexibility in how the buildings can be arranged on the site. So in terms of the rear parking, I think it's an excellent suggestion to not have snout house kind of development with all of the garages facing the front, where what you really see is just nothing but a bunch of open mouths, if you will, at the bottom of the building. No matter what the upper level or two may look like, it tends to take away from that. So having parking around the back would be great, but the trade-offs are areas for recreating and play areas may be a little more difficult. You put the buildings closer to the street, it's not going to be where you're going to have a lot of play area anyway. But that parking apron now in the back cuts into any area that you may have for green space and for anybody who wants to recreate back there. The other concern about that would be that from a drainage perspective, the EPA is really cracking down on cities and what they have to do to take care of their stormwater. And a lot of cities that I'm aware of have limited the amount of drainage that you can have coming off a property, what has to go into your storm drain system. And so anything that increases the amount of pavement is kind of bad, even if it results in a better urban design. So that's something that we may want to look at, but I think the suggestion for the PUD or PRUD and the parking in the back are very, very good ideas. What I don't know is if that does a couple of negative things. One, how much slower now is the process for the applicant? Do they have to get an additional approval from the council and the planning commission through a conditional use for the overlay, and is a PRUD a conditional use, or is it a permitted use in the RM zone, if the RM zone were to be granted?
I am as new as you, Paul. You
Okay.
have just asked me questions that I don't comfortably know how to answer.
Okay.
I think I can answer it. It's a rezone, it's a legislative action, so we would have to rezone whatever the underlying zone is, and then legislatively say, yes, we want the PRUD over the top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I would want to confirm, right, in code that we could do this, but I think that if that was the recommendation from the commission tonight, we would just add that into the
Yeah.
development agreement, and that's what planning commission, or excuse me, that's what then the city council would consider as the full recommendation of the development agreement, but we add on that PRUD to determine whether or not that would be feasible.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like I said, there, you oftentimes you try and make concessions to solve one problem and end up creating other problems, and that's kind of the unknown here, right? And the applicant hasn't engineered this site enough to know if that would create further problems too. But I tend to agree with you, Commissioner Sunloff, that I think that if that is doable, it would be tight. It definitely probably is not doable with the setbacks that exist on the books. So, but that's, I would ask the applicant if they were amenable to that idea.
So Commissioner Page has a comment.
Yeah, hey, just a comment. I think we need to be careful on this. The thing is just listen to the people here. I think one of the things, when all the existing homes are set back 31 feet from the sidewalk, and if we sit there and try to solve this problem, I hope you understand, if we put the parking behind that building's going to be brought forward. That's going to look like an oddball. That's going to be, I mean, the whole purpose of that is to kind of have it go back in there, and you're not going to see it as much. You put the parking in the back, you're going to be bringing it forward. And here's another thing you have to consider too. Where the kids, when there's kids in there, where they're going to play? They're going to be playing in the front yard by the street. There's not going to be a whole lot of grass in the back. So my opinion is let the builders and the developers who know best, let them handle it the way, and I think that's a wise thing. I hate to see legislators, building homes from the bench, and I just don't think that's a wise thing.
Can I ask a question for staff? So, Melinda, can you speak more to your discussions with the developer on just the suggestion of the R2 zoning? I appreciate the response that's been given and the recommendation that the RM zoning prevents some of the parking issues or the traffic issues, and correct me if I'm wrong, but current zoning right now would allow for 3 homes with 3 driveways, right?
Correct.
So where the commission last time felt more comfortable with the R2 suggestion, I'm just curious if there was any further discussion beyond just the traffic issues or the inconveniences to the developer?
Well, so it was a number of things, and I'll answer your question, and then if the applicant feels like they want to add on to, they can. But one is that if it were to go to R2, we would have to start the public notification process over again, because they're applying for an entirely different zone than what we have already been talking about. And so we would have to set another public hearing date. We would have to get public hearing notices published and mailed out a minimum of 10 days before the public hearing. And then we would have to, as we did on February 10th, we would have to let anybody who comes speak their 3 minutes and go through that process based on the R2 zone. They didn't wish to delay to do that. Then, after that, if it was approved, they would have to go through a subdivision process that would come through the Planning Commission for preliminary and the City Council for preliminary approval, and then it comes back to the Planning Commission for final approval. That adds on another probably, to go that route I would say probably that's another 90 days minimum. But I think equally is concerning to them of taking the time. And first of all, let me say, like, they own the property. They closed on the property. They own it. So they're committed. Oftentimes when we have applications considered like this, people are just under contract for the property and they won't complete the purchase if the rezone doesn't go through. That's not the case. They own the property. This is the property owner. But the other reason was you have a lot of economies of scale that come into place when you share walls, when you have one building versus three buildings. And with the current construction environment, everything supply chain, they have felt that keeping this to one building versus three separate buildings would be more cost efficient. And therefore then at the end route, the lease rates would be, I think, more reasonable than trying to construct. Now you have, again, the added time, the subdivision process, the engineering for all of that, and then you have to construct three completely separate buildings that would have three different, everything that goes with the construction of three separate buildings, so versus just one. So there is a lot of economies of scale and efficiencies that come into play when you have shared walls.
Okay.
And if there's anything else the applicant would like to add.
So with the RM as well, then the whole purpose of us wanting to do that too is to eliminate parking. If we go R2 or R4, we tried to build multiple units, multiple structures, we still have multiple driveways and parking becomes an issue, and that was one of the big concerns of the neighborhood as well. So it's not just about what costs us less or what's easier to do, but it's also about safety too. And ultimately, if we look at it and we look at R2 and R4, RM is still the best situation if we want to fit 6 units there, rather than doing 3 homes and ADU dwellings, or multiple structures with multiple units there. Parking becomes the issue.
Just to clarify, so are you saying that your thought was, and reasonable minds may differ on this, but your thought was if it was 3 separate units, but 3 separate buildings, but 6 total units, they weren't all one, that the parking issue, meaning where the cars are going to go, would be exacerbated? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, it'd be harder. Parking would be harder.
And
it's
so
more challenging for us.
Consolidating them makes it so that parking can be easier or better accommodated, is what you're saying?
Parking and traffic, I should say.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we ready for a motion?
I would like to make a motion. I will recommend approval of the development agreement and rezone of 478 South Main Street from R1 single family residential to an RM multiple family district zone.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second.
Can I clarify? Implied in that is the development agreement as proposed is what would be favorably recommended, is that?
Correct.
Okay.
We'll start the voting with Jared.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
And it passes.
For the public here in attendance tonight, thank you. The Planning Commission recommends to the City Council recommends what we talked about here tonight. This will then come before the City Council, who is the deciding body on this. It will not, we do have a City Council meeting scheduled next week. It will not be next week. The council, I think the next City Council meeting date it could possibly be on would be the 14th of April. Yeah, so I would say for sure check the agenda, but we will have this this recommendation then, the Planning Commission recommendation We'll include all of the information that's been submitted, the minutes. That will all be included in the packet that goes to the city council for that meeting. And unless there's some unforeseen circumstances, I think it'll come before on April 14th.
Thank you. So next agenda on the item is a call to the public. I'll give you one.
Christian Nielsen, I live in Kaysville. I'll try to make this quick. You know, when I come here and hear this, and following the potential future master plan for Kaysville, I think it makes sense to take the major streets and just rezone them all to R-M. Up front. Otherwise, I think in the next year to 10 years, we're going to see people come and you're going to have debates every time. You know, not in my backyard, I don't want it, doesn't belong here. When that's the general direction we're moving anyway. So I think it would be, I don't know who would make that decision. If that's going to be the recommendation, I don't know if it could just be made for all, you know, Main Street and Second North, I think are the two. But I would highly recommend we do that. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Christian Nielsen, visionary.
What?
Christian Nielsen, visionary.
I mean, personally, I would recommend that we change all zoning to R-M. I don't think it's that dense anyways when you compare it to other cities. I think, you know, Layton has a more dense R-M. I think the Salt Lake City in general has a more dense R-M. When you start 20
20 units per acre.
Yeah, it's 20 units per
yeah.
acre.
When you start looking at things like transit, you know, I mean, I'm filling up my car now, and when you look at things like transit, it's going to play a bigger part in people's lives. That, you know, transit-based development is going to be key to our
TOD, transit-oriented development.
transit-oriented
Yeah,
development. So, okay, that's all.
Thank you,
very
Christian.
much.
Just a quick observation. Mark Jensen, 407 South, 225 East. Josh, I loved your recommendation to shore up the development agreement, and then we approved it without even caveating that. That seemed like a misstep for me, but.
I'm going to do that anyway, just so you know.
Okay, as long as
We'll
it gets in
include
there,
it.
I'm great. I think it was a
Yeah.
great suggestion. I just was like, whoa, why didn't that happen as part of the approval? Because it
Yeah.
doesn't have to happen at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the motion, but I was planning on making a change to that anyway. So I think it's a
It
good
would have been,
suggestion.
all I'm saying is it would have been better to have included that in the approval. That's all I'm saying. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
I agree with you.
Okay. And then other matters.
I want to thank the planning commission members who attended the training on the 17th it was, right? No, I don't know what day it was. Yeah, the 24th. That's the day it was over in Clearfield. Thanks for those who came. It was, I think, a really well-spent 3 hours. There's some other sessions that are still available if you would like to attend. There's even going to be a Zoom session. So if you couldn't make it last time, don't feel like your chances are all lost.
Sorry I wasn't able to go.
Yeah. So Wilf and Craig Call, I think, did a really good job. They've got it dialed in. That's where Wilf is tonight. Just as a point of order, I am right now planning on attending the Utah APA conference next week down in Kanab. So, or is it in 2 weeks down in Kanab? The 24th, 23rd through the 25th. So hopefully can learn and hear some great things down there. Also did want to tell you we just talked about the planning commission, or excuse me, the next city council meeting would be April 14th. That technically would be a city planning or planning commission meeting night. City council canceled their meeting on April 7th because of spring break and wants to hold their meeting on the 14th. So that means our next planning commission meeting that we would have regularly scheduled would be April 28th. I think that we can be okay to go that long. We know we can just tell people that's the expectation. We can't imagine that there would be anything that would come up that would need us to schedule a special meeting. But I suppose if there was, we would contact you and let you know if that was necessary. But I think we're just looking at holding, so we'll have our meeting 2 weeks from tonight, and then the next meeting after that would be April 28th. So
Okay.
we do have an application for the meeting on the 24th. In fact, I sent out incorrect information in the public hearing notice. So wanting to be fully transparent, we re-noticed that, and it'll be a rezone on, it's 471 East, 200 North, and the notice I sent out said that it could have up to, so it's going from R18 to RM is the request, and the rezone notice said that it would be up to 2 units, but it's actually 3. So we chose to renotice, want to make sure that we're correct, and I need to be better at math. And I think Dan, because he is the one who actually was, he did the math. He did the math correctly. So it takes a village. But that's really everything. So unless there's.
I just want to say Kwan's watching us from Ukraine.
Yeah.
He texted me about midway through the meeting, so it was
good.
kind of crackly. But he wanted everybody to know he's watching and says hi.
Good.
He's jet lagged and 9 hours ahead of us.
That's pretty cool what he's doing. I saw that and it's like, wait, he's our planning commission member. We need to, yeah, it's pretty cool. Thank him for what he's doing.
So, thank you for everything staff does. If we have nothing further, do I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
First time that you haven't given the motion.
The chair can't do it.
What did you say? So we've been conditioned to hear that from you, yeah.
Pattern there.
That's another bad thing about the ship behind. I should have got, I will appreciate your Main
Yes.
Construction, real estate.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious. Yeah, I do probate litigation.
Oh, do you? Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's mostly construction, but real estate as well. Yeah. So land use stuff too. So.
Yeah.
Did you see the guy in the back? Did you see the guy in the back when we all this? He was not happy. Hey, how are you?
I miss hanging out up here with these guys, man.
It was kind of fun. This is my first official meeting sitting up here. So I was biting my tongue. I'm going to have to get used to that.
No. You got this.
I had like 13 suggestions for findings for the motion to support the motion. Because where I come from is if you make a motion, you send a bunch of findings to say, here's why we said that. But I don't know, I couldn't pull up the agenda, so I don't know if she's already done that.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm a big Red Sox fan.
I didn't ask questions. You Red Sox?
Are you guys hiding out in here?
Is my,
Something wrong with him, obviously. So otherwise he'd be a Yankees fan.
Oh, God, don't even go there.
Oh, I went there.
Oh, gee.
I lived in New England as a kid. When I
The
was
first game I ever went to was
Fenway.
Fenway.
Me too.
And my mom's a diehard Yankees fan. She raised 6 Red Sox kids.
In New England, you were either Red Sox or Yankees. And the further north you go,
The more Red Sox.
the more Red Sox. And you better not even think about being.
Oh, you mentioned Yankees.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Same way with the Bruins. The Bruins and the Rangers.
I hate Patriots.
I'm not a big Patriots fan.
I'm more of a Pittsburgh.
Right, yeah.
I always grew up liking the.
Maybe there's documents right there. There's documents on the back.
1910 and 1920.